call me Nico. My last name is too difficult to pronounce for most people.
Okay, but when I introduce you, should I say we're here with Nico B?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Perfect. And Nico, let me ask you another question. Right now, cult epics, there's no actual brick and mortar retail store or anything like that, right? It's strictly just a distributor and an online store.
Yeah, we're basically a label, and we sell through our website as well.
Okay, cool.
But all our stuff is available everywhere, Amazon, whatever you can think of.
Right, of course, yeah.
All right, let's do this. Joe.
Are we ready to rock?
You're on. We're live.
Oh, I'm live. Okay. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Art Fight Podcast. We've got a guest on the phone today with us, so we're doing some new technical things here. I'm glad everybody's here to listen to the show. We've got a great guest here today. He is the man behind the Cult Epics film distribution and book publisher. And he's a legendary underground film impresario who's a director in his own right. And he's got a brand new project out right now that we're going to talk about. Welcome, Nico B, to the Art Fight Podcast. How you doing, Nico?
Hey, I'm good. Nice to talk to you guys.
Nice to talk to you too. I'm glad we were able to connect with you today. And like I said, you're out in California now. Is that right, in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I'm in the Los Angeles area.
Yeah, we just talked to another Los Angelino, so this is becoming a habit for us, doing these connecting the South to the West Coast here in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, here's where the entertainment is, they say.
That's what they tell me too. Anyway, so first off, I think it might be fun to get into your latest project. This is how we got connected. I got a press release from you guys talking about your latest project, which is called. Hold on a second. Let me see the name of it here. I want to make sure I get it right. Bunny, Women of the Sun, Bunny Yeager in Mexico. And it's a beautiful book of pinup photography. Why don't you give us a little bit of background about the book and tell us who Bunny Yeager was?
Yeah, so basically Bunny Yeager is mostly known by the cheetah and beach photos he took of Bettie Page, who you're probably familiar with, in the 1950s. And I knew Bunny since the late 90s. I was a film student, and I shot a documentary called 100 Girls by Bunny Yeager. I was a big fan of her pinup photography. I also knew Bettie Page at the same time. I used to write with her, etc., from Europe when I lived in Europe at the time and was releasing all these Bettie Page films on VHS in the day. And later on, a couple of years ago, I contacted Bunny again, and we were shooting with a pinup called Claire's and Claire's. There's a lot of similarity with Bettie Page. Mm-hmm. And I was working on a TV show with her, and she wanted to shoot with Bunny Yeager. And I said, well, how about for the show you interview her, and afterwards we do a shoot, which all happened. And
I see.
Legendary, because it was also the last shoot of Bunny Yeager. 2 weeks later, she passed away. This was released, actually it's being released in a week or so on Blu-ray, the Claire's and Claire show, which includes that interview and the shoot with Bunny Yeager. Very beautiful photographs. And at the time I talked to Bunny when I was meeting her, and I said, did you know that I'm a book publisher now? She said, no, really? And she said, I have a book I want you to do, and it's called Bunny Yeager in Mexico. And I said, okay, what's that? I never heard of it. And she said, I took all these photos in the 60s, kind of after the whole Bettie Page thing. She discovered a model called Christine Starr, and she was the only exclusive model of hers. And she went to Mexico and shot all these pictures of her in front of the temples of Chichen Itza, etc. And when I saw them the first time, after she passed away, actually, because her daughter passed these photos to me, I was amazed. And we made an agreement and a contract and deal. And basically now the fruits 2 years later are in the book. And the book is available, in bookstores. at least online. I don't know how many bookstores are open or whatever, but
Yeah, good
it is
point.
on Amazon, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a good time. I mean, honestly, it's a good time to be releasing books and movies. I think that's we talked to lots of people who are actually we talked to lots of artists and martial artists, and a lot of those people in general have really people who are trying to have exhibitions in public galleries, or people who are trying to have martial arts tournaments, or people who are trying to play live shows with their bands or whatever. So much of our arts and entertainment culture has been shut down, but films and books and stuff, it's the perfect time. People are sitting at home with time to read, time to watch a film. So in a weird way, I think it's actually a really good time. And I also think that this book in particular, with these beautiful outdoor shots, very mystical, psychedelic, photographs of these models, on these, beautiful architectural structures and in these beautiful settings in Mexico. It's soothing to our souls as we're trapped indoors mostly nowadays.
Yeah. Well, that's true. It was weird because I had an exhibit planned in Los Angeles, and that was actually opened up 2 weeks ago, and it was very strange. We had to do, first of all, online exhibits. So the pictures are online at La Luz de Jesus Gallery in Los Angeles. And they basically created an online video to visit the gallery, and
Right.
it's extremely abstract. However, they were able, with LA slowly opening up, they were able to make appointments on the weekends. So there are these time slots that people can make an appointment with two people at the same time, and it's been packed. I mean, it's Saturday and Sundays it's right now, and it's every weekend is booked.
Oh,
And
wow,
hopefully
great.
in the last week we will be doing a show where some more people can come in, but we're not sure because the regulations are even tighter again in LA because of the demonstrations and people not wearing masks, etc. Among young people, there's a lot of cases right now, more than ever in LA, in California. So anyway, it's a new way of seeing an art show, I guess, which is disappointing because I wanted to have a celebration, a party, with all the people. There were some celebrities who are now 70, 80 years old. We're going to come,
Oh, that's amazing.
You, Bunny Yeager, but now they're not coming. So hopefully we'll redo it in Miami next year when things are cleared again.
Oh, yeah, hopefully, right. I think it's really interesting too how it's hard for us personally, I think, all to negotiate losing exhibits or being able to follow through with big plans and projects. On one hand, certainly it feels really bad and it's frustrating and you feel like you're missing out on a time. And at the same time, there's always, there's people that are, really deeply mortally suffering right now. So it's a strange place to be sort of in between those kind of realities. And still, you want to keep going. And speaking of that, I wanted to address you mentioned Bunny's daughter, and there's a great forward in the edition that I see that is written by her, and it speaks of Bunny being sort of a nonstop sort of force. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your relationship with Bunny's daughter, and also how that relates to Bunny.
Yeah. Well, I used to visit Bunny in Miami. We did quite a few projects together. She also worked on my movie Bettie Page, Dark Angel, the opening shot with being in Miami. And I met her daughter many times. Her daughter, by the hand, is deaf and dumb, meaning she can't talk, and everything is by sign language. So it was extremely difficult to do this forward because we had to do it by the phone because I wasn't there. And we had an interpreter, and that was a very interesting way of doing forward.
Wow.
But anyway, she's been extremely cooperative, and I've met her many times, and I worked with Bunny, about 10 times in my life.
That's awesome. I mean, what about like Bunny's work ethic, like Brian mentioned, and I read that forward as well.
Oh, yeah.
And she seemed to, to be just like one of these artists who is just like constantly on the go, right?
Right, because I knew her, in the day when I was doing art exhibits in Holland, actually, and Paris, etc., of the Bettie Page photos. I rediscovered all these photos when I was young. And this is a long time ago. I'm talking about 90s, I guess, 80s,
Right.
90s. And I was doing, so, I was always corresponding with her and buying photos from her. She would make prints, etc. And she was constantly looking for outlets, where to promote her photography, which was unique and one of a kind. I mean, it's in museums, etc. I mean, she has a huge following because of pinups. But on the other hand, there's art collectors as well who are really into her work. I mean, it eliminates in a different way than just seeing a girl naked.
Mm-hmm.
It's art photography.
I think one of the things that made me interested in having this interview with you, like we talked about before we got on the air, was that a lot of people don't know this, but Bettie Page was originally from Nashville, so she connects to our audience that's here locally. Because we all think of Bettie Page as like a local girl who became famous, and like you mentioned when you were when we first got on the phone, Bunny took some of the most iconic images of Betty, the one with Betty kneeling down between two cheetahs, and didn't Bunny also take the one with where Betty has the Santa hat on and she's putting an ornament on a tree?
Yeah, exactly. For Playboy, there was a Playmate cover. The 1950s, 54, I believe.
Yeah. See, and like you said too, like you're talking about like getting, sort of discovering Bettie Page in like the early 90s or late 80s or whatever. She really sort of had this revival where she kind of became, kind of an underground icon all over again. What is it? I mean, I know we're going to get into more about about all the films that you've distributed and the films that you've made and things. But in a way, Betty is like the sort of persona kind of embodiment of this same phenomenon. What is it about these people or these works of art, these films, these photographs and things, that makes them these things that never necessarily become acclaimed in terms of the popular mainstream, but they are these things that just are constantly rediscovered by new generations of people who become obsessed with them and find them to be far more interesting than the things that you find in the mainstream.
Yeah. Well, the answer did become mainstream when the Hollywood movie was made 3 years after my movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I must say, obviously it's her looks. I mean, it's the bangs, it's the black hair, the darkness. She shows,
Mm-hmm.
the beauty, her curves. I mean, people think at that time, people were promoting the perfect slim girl in the 70s and 80s, I think. And that really, to me and many people, that didn't appeal. We just wanted a real woman or something mysterious with a mystery, etc. And, I was a punk rocker and, into goth music or whatever, and I was completely, flabbergasted when I saw these pictures from the 50s. It was like an icon to me at that time. It was like unusual, and I never seen anything like it. And so until you see an image of her, you either love her or hate her, I guess. You either go for it or you don't go for it. But still, it's unique. She had a unique style, and I think that's what appeals to people to this day. She was kind of from the underground, because obviously it was a daring time in the 50s to do this stuff, to do bondage in the 50s. I mean, that was not openly discussed. It was sold under counter, and now it's fetid bondage. Who cares, right? It's in many movies, etc. But there it was, and it was already in the 50s and before that. But she was the icon of that whole period. Yeah.
I think it's interesting too how it's like, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, I suppose, and seeing even this kind of work, and knowing about this, even just the sort of the pinup realm, it seemed like such a distant sort of nostalgia even at that time. But as you get older, as you know, it's like that really wasn't that long ago. But you think about how it went from something that I think in the broader culture is kind of perhaps sort of fetishized as sort of nostalgia without necessarily a lot of substance. But then, as you mentioned, there is a huge fine art quotient to this, and there's also I think a deeper, over time, more appreciation and understanding for this entire sort of world, really. And I think about how hard it must have been to shoot, a lot of this work, to be at Chichen Itza at that time, even in the foreword again, talks about running around, trying to snap, these great photos, but at the same time avoiding soldiers and having to cover up and sort of duck for cover and, sort of this clandestine sort of operation. And they were doing all that, obviously before technology and a lot of things that would be perhaps helpful. And maybe that was seen as way more perhaps heretical at that time. So I'm just curious. So I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, definitely was a different time. And to me, I was looking at it the other day, I was counting the years, and I was like, whoa, this is 60 years ago, more than 60 years ago. That's a long time. I mean, it's a lifetime of a person, nearly. And Bettie Page was 70 years ago or more. And so that is a different period. And now it was a different time where a kind of sexual revolution was coming up, which happened obviously in the 70s. So Bunny was ahead of her time. And basically now you can't even walk up to the temple of Chichen Itza. It's not allowed by the government. It's now completely restricted. And can you imagine a woman being nude there in front of these temples? That would be completely scandalous. I mean, it's extremely strange, but it's true. And so this was a different time, a different area, and I'm glad I was there. And Bunny took these photos. And, I had maybe 2 people out of 1,000 people saying sacrilege or something. Well, I didn't take the picture, but she did. But on the other hand, she took them because she was just an open-minded person, a woman who just understood, the beauty of women and et cetera. Whatever surroundings she shot it in, it didn't really matter. I mean, she shot Bettie Page on the beach nude many times, and incredible, beautiful pictures. But I think if you do it these days, you probably get a ticket if you do that, unless you have a permit. So, it was a completely different time. It was before the sexual revolution. It was a free time, I think, in many ways, but maybe not in all ways, And I think that appealed to men and maybe women at the time. Now it appeals to women as well. And, she's an icon for many women, the way, Bettie Page dressed, even the clothing, that's why they have all these Bettie Page stores. That's why all these rockabilly people are into her. I completely understand it. It was a big example for many young people.
Yeah, and you go ahead, Nico.
No, that was it.
I was going to say, you're making a good point about Bunny as well, and I wanted to ask you this. I mean, it's my impression. I mean, obviously, you're the expert publishing these books, and you know a lot more than I do, and that's why we have people like you on the show. But it's my impression that, back in the day, back in the 50s and the 60s, that it was obviously lots of men were attracted to being in the business of shooting pinup models, but Bunny was kind of a pioneer as a female in that field, was she not?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, now there's Diane Arbus and different photographers who basically, applaud her for what she did. But on the other hand, Bettie Page, for instance, I talked to her later on, and she didn't really understand. She understood the pinup photos. She didn't really understand the bondage photos. She didn't understand what the appeal was. She just got paid 10 times more. So that's why she did it.
Yeah.
But she did, and she had no, reservations about certain things. She was an extremely open-minded person. I remember reading stories about her, how her sex life was, etc. She was like freewheeling, you could say that. She was married many times, and after that she became obviously a Catholic, and many bad things happened to her. But at that time she was a free woman, and she did what she wanted to do. And I think that's what shows.
What about that? I think that again, one of the things that made this, all these different things that we're talking about today, interesting to me was the fact that Bettie Page was connected to this, that she has this connection to Nashville. And I think one of the things that, that you just mentioned about Bettie and what makes her so iconic is this mystery we have around her and who she was and what kind of a person was she in real life. And in some of the photos, like some of the photos that Bunny took, there's a real innocence that comes off of her. But at the same time, there's also these famous photos that you mentioned, which are these bondage photos where she's all tied up in lingerie and whatnot. And so there is this mystery that surrounds her. And, you're one of the people who's tried to uncover some of that mystery by making your film. Tell us a little bit about the movie that you made about Bettie Page.
Yeah. Well, basically, I knew a lot about Bettie Page. I mean, I basically had every photograph of Bunny Yeager and Irving Klaw at the time. I know what was going on. A lot of people do not know this, that Bunny Yeager even took some of the bondage photos for Irving Klaw when he visited Miami. I recently discovered this. She was the one who's clicking the camera.
You heard it here first, people.
And Irving was there. I mean, the agent was going to send me some pictures of that, and I probably seen them, but probably nobody know that she took them.
Right, of course.
So she was completely, open-minded. She would, it didn't matter. The only thing, she never wanted to go into the exploitation and adult market, which I must say I applaud her for, because that would set the stuff completely apart. And that's where it is now. What was the question again?
I basically wanted you to tell us a little bit about the movie that you made, which is called Bettie Page, Dark Angel. Yeah. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
And right. And go ahead.
Yeah. Well, basically, I never wanted, as I said, I never wanted to make a film. I had no ambition. I knew everything about Bettie Page, but I had no ambition making a film. I'm more like an underground filmmaker. Mm-hmm. I'm more like an artist. Unless I feel inspiration, I make it. I don't do it for money. Mm-hmm. So anyway, there was a time I just made a film called Pig with Ross Williams of Christian Dad, which is a cult underground film. It has a big audience to this day. It's a short film, but people love this film for some reason, and obviously because of Ross. And after I made that film, I was at a photographer's studio, a friend of mine, and she showed me these pictures of a girl, and she's a photographer, and I was looking at her, I was like, whoa, who's this girl? And she didn't look like Bettie Page at all. She had no bangs, etc., but she was a gorgeous girl. And I was like, I really want to work with this person. I don't know why. It's something is going to happen. This always happens to me. Before I meet somebody, something happens, and then I meet them by accident. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't say anything to her. But later on, I said, "Who's that?" And she said, "Oh, that's Paige Richards." And I said, "Oh, really? Well, I never heard of her." And she said, she wants to meet you. She loves your film, Pig. And I'm like, really? I didn't think you would seen that. And I said, yeah, I've seen her husband love the film, and she wants to work with you. And so I met her. And we met and so I talked to her on the phone, I think. She said, "Oh yeah, I love your company. You release all these Bettie Page original films on the DVD, etc." And I said, "Oh, you've seen some of them? Okay, cool." And then I met her, and she was all dressed up like Bettie Page. She had the bangs and everything. I was like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And she said, "I really want to do a Bettie Page project with you." And I was like, "Okay, well, I don't really." It's like, but I said, this is really strange. It feels like I'm meeting Bettie Page. She even had a 50s dress on. I remember it was at Café Figaro in Los Angeles. And I said, this is extremely strange. And I said, well, you definitely have the looks, but let's talk about it. And so slowly I found out that her photography was a lot of fetish photography and videos, I guess. Or maybe not videos. She wanted me to do a video of her as Bettie Page. And I said, well, you know what? What's interesting to me is I've been trying to find these bondage films for years. Most of them were destroyed. I did one video I licensed from Paula Claw at the time, and I titled it Bettie Page Bondage Queen. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty successful. And I was like, okay, but where are the other films? I asked Paula. She said, oh, they're all destroyed because we got in trouble with the law at the time. There was some kind of senator who went after people. Mm-hmm. In the 50s or 60s, the Fever, I think his name was, and I said, "Oh, really? That's sad." But I had all these photos of her as jungle girl, as she's tying somebody to a tree, or she's being tied to a tree, and I was like, "Okay, this is really cool stuff." And so what I decided is to recreate these films, these 4-minute shorts. That's how they were, how long they were. They were these loops. They shot on 16 and Super 8, whatever. And I was like, well, I want to recreate them on 16 millimeter in black and white, exactly how they did it then with this girl. And so from the photograph, sometimes I only had one was called Pony Girl, where she was like tied up like a pony girl. And from that one photo, me and my girlfriend, we would create a whole scene because she knew a lot about bondage. And I said, and so we created this whole scene from just one photo, and that's how we did it. We made 6 shorts. And then I was thinking, well, I would release this Paige Richards as Bettie Page in bondage or something, like Dieter von Teese does. She does these videos, etc. at the time. Except I would shoot only on film. I don't like video too much. And so at the time, but then I thought, well, how about I tell the story, why these films and why these photographs were so discriminating to people, and why she left the audience, why she became seclusive and didn't want anything to do with it anymore, because nobody knew at that time what happened to her.
Right.
In the 80s, I didn't even know if she was still alive or not. Nobody knew until the late 80s. There was an article appeared, and she seemed to be alive. And so anyway, that story fascinated me, and then I shot that on mini DV at the time. That was the DHD format. There was no HD yet. Right before HD, people used for video, and I integrated the films, the shorts, with the storyline, and that's what I did. Completely a kind of Ed Wood style kind of movie. Completely, you have to really sit down to watch it. And but I figured it was very accurate of what's going on. So it has a love and hate audience, because people expecting a Hollywood movie, which it is not. But it is a description of the film she did in the day and what happened to her. And I was very happy with it. It was actually the most successful release of Cult Epics ever, because it was reissued when the Gretchen Mol Bettie Page film came out. And my distributor was Ryko under Warner Brothers, and did extremely well on DVD at that time.
Killer.
So it's it's quite a responsibility to take on the sort of recreation of these lost tapes.
Yeah, maybe, but to me it came all natural in that sense.
Yeah,
I mean, it was an extremely low budget. It was I think we did the whole thing. We shot the film in 3 days in LA, in the studio. But we also recreated Howard Hughes scene. It was another thing why she disappeared from the scene. We recreated the Miami period and the movie star period in 3 cities. We shot in 10 days, including flying, and everything went very smooth actually. And it was made for $50,000, I believe.
Wow!
And
so what you're saying is
it's completely low budget filmmaking.
So what you're saying is it's the only film in history that happened on time, within budget, with no problems.
Well, it was extremely crazy. I mean, it went like this. Next week we're flying to Miami. I need a diner which is open in the middle of the night. And with this thing, I called this diner, this 50s diner, and I tell you, the guy said, "Oh, I love Bettie Page." Then he says, "Oh, we're closed on this day. You want to shoot?" But that's perfect, because normally we're open 365 days a year. And that day when we arrived, it was closed because there was some thing going on in Miami.
Wow.
And the guy left us the key. He said, "Okay, you can shoot as long as you want. We love your project." And same thing. And it was completely guerrilla film style making. We smuggled the lights through the hotel lobby. We were staying on the beach to shoot the last scene of the movie. With her walking on the beach, walking to the chapel, which we shot in Hollywood. And it was completely underground filmmaking. You just did it as it come, and everything went smooth for some reason.
It's amazing. It's amazing when you're not worried about permits or doing anything legally or correctly, how fast and efficiently you can get everything done.
Exactly. That's what I believe in. But it's it's harder these days than ever in America. It's harder and harder to do that.
Yeah.
But that's I love that. I mean, when things just happen and everything goes.
That is your punk rock spirit.
You mentioned that you prefer to film with 16 millimeter versus on video. Like what is your, tell us a little bit. I mean, we talk about that kind of thing a lot, analog versus digital, or, different kinds of tools that we prefer over others. What about you? Why would you rather work with film?
well, it's a better moving image. The people always look better on film, but I love Super 8, for instance. For some reason, I do a lot of underground films. On Super 8, it's also very easy to shoot guerrilla style on Super 8 because nobody see you coming.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need lights a lot of the time, unless you do indoors. And so you can just shoot, and I like that whole ethic. And then 16 I love is a little bit more, you need a camera guy mostly. I mean, I shoot all of it myself too. I'm the camera guy. Behind all my movies, I shot them. Nobody knows this. But because I have an eye how I want it, and I shoot it, and that's it. And I only take maybe 1 to 3 takes, and that's it. Then I'm done. I have it. So it's funny. I hired, very established cinematographers, and they look at me and they said, "Well, you know exactly how you want it. Maybe you shoot it, and I just do the lights for you." It always ends up like that. It's the strangest thing. And I didn't plan it, but I love those formats. Video, I mean, it looks more flat. I mean, it worked for the Bettie Page thing because I wanted to be kind of campy.
Mm-hmm.
And so to shoot the color scenes, her storyline, kind of like an Ed Wood movie to me,
right.
makes it a little campy and, two-dimensional in a way. And I like that. It becomes like a comic book or something. And I like that whole effect.
Yeah, that's cool, man. And I appreciate what you're saying there, because that's something that I find a lot is like, artists who, I always appreciate it when an artist is really thinking through like their tools, their medium, their process in terms of like, what is the subject? Like, it's not like, I'm changing my subject and now I'm just going to do the same thing I did last time. It's like, no, if it's a different subject, maybe you should approach it differently with a different technique that makes that enhances and helps you investigate and interrogate the subject that you're now doing. So I like the idea that you're saying, hey, the switch in the format there isn't something you would normally do, but it made sense because it accentuated what you're trying to do with that subject.
Yeah, I mean, I think the format comes after your subject.
Yeah.
So when you know your subject, then it comes all together what you're going to film on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great.
I mean, then sometimes it's a choice of budget, etc., and then
sure.
sometimes the wrong choice because of that.
Right.
But I mean, again, I'm an underground, low-budget filmmaker. And I don't have any obligations to producers because I'm the producer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic, man. Well, speaking of which, speaking of how you're the man behind your movies and also the man behind the camera, let's talk for a second about your background as a film distributor and somebody who's really, not only do you celebrate underground films and underground subjects in these books that you're releasing, but you've literally made sure those things have been available to the world. Can we start talking a little bit about the store that you opened in the Netherlands back in the early 90s, and then kind of get up to speed with what's going on with cult epics nowadays?
Yeah. So basically, I was actually in film school. That's how I met Bunny. But that's how I met Bunny to do the pinup documentary, and I just approached her. And what my teacher said, well, and she was like, her best friends were like Abel Ferrara and Bob Dylan and Andy Warhol, and she lived in Amsterdam. And she was this cool director, Babette Van Loo. And she's still a close friend to me these days. She gave me a lot of advice in life.
Great.
She's a Buddhist now. She mostly makes Buddhist films. She used to do punk rock films. She shot the Sex Pistols that you could think of, Cabaret Voltaire. She was, and she hired me because of my personality and not because I was such a great filmmaker. But she knew, what I wanted to do is a true thing to art, and so she hired me. I had to drive every day to Den Haag, which is 50 miles from Amsterdam. But she would pick me up to go to school. She was my teacher. So it's extremely funny. And so from there on, she said at one point to me, well, you can keep going to school, but maybe it's better you just make money, and then because nobody's going to finance the films you want to make, she said. She was very honest. And so how about you make money first, and then you can make your films whatever you want. And I said, okay, great. Then I'll do that. I had no idea what it meant. Well, it meant, she said, just do something you love. And I love music. I was actually a music distributor at that time. I was distributing, Death in June in the Benelux and Europe where I lived, and other bands. I was representative of some labels from France, etc. I was representing some bands like Von Magnet and Gallon Drunk and all kinds of, rock and roll stuff. And basically, I started music magazine, I remember, and then I came to the nobody's buying CDs anymore at one point. It happened, really. It was really strange, and vinyl was already going out. And so I thought, okay, my biggest love is film.
Right.
And I used to collect videotapes and swap with people all around the world. I could see, crazy films, you couldn't find anywhere else, like, Salo or Cannibal Holocaust or Angst. So all these movies are later on released. And you couldn't find them legally, just only swapping with people. So suddenly I came to say, okay, what about I call all the video distributors, and Seltzer didn't exist yet. And I say, how about the Clockwork Orange? I call Warner and said, how about I buy 100 copies? And they said, okay, well, it's only out on rental. It's $200 rental. And I said, okay, but I'm not buying it for rental. So can you sell it to me for this? And they said, yes. So we're selling tapes between $50 and $100. Well, Gildings, which was actually half at the time. And basically from there on, I started a mail order called Cold Video, and it was a huge success. Everybody around Europe knew we had the uncut stuff. Horror movies, exploitation movies, but also art house films and rare controversial art house films of Fellini or whoever you can think of. And from there on, I had a little niche in the bookstore, and the guy was flabbergasted. This is in the late 80s, that I would sell more VHS tapes than he did in books. And this was like a specialized bookstore called Sine Qua Non at the time. And I was like, okay. And so I thought, well, and then the guy was trying to, raise my rent or whatever he was charging me, what I can't remember, per tape or something. And I thought, well, I could just open my own store. And then I started the cult video stores in Amsterdam first, Rotterdam, some other cities, because it was such a success. Everybody from all over Holland were coming to my store to rent or buy tapes, and then all from everywhere, from UK, Germany. They knew we had the real deal. We had anything from Eisenstein to Cannibal Holocaust, so people go like, whoa. This is crazy. And, there's a cinephile. For cinephiles, it was the paradise. And it was basically, what I liked and the films I liked. And I thought they were cool. And it was not, it wasn't horror, comedy, and action. No, it was this country and this director and every director. I would travel all around Europe and find tapes in other stores where they, at that time, finally started selling VHS. And ran them out. We had the biggest collection, and then it became extremely famous because Tarantino was in town writing Pulp Fiction, and he was a member in our store, and all the movies he rented was, all the Italian exploitation films, Japanese stuff. I went to Hong Kong at the time and met with John Woo, but I wanted to buy Bullet in the Head, and they wanted to sell me Hard Boiled, and I was like, well, I'm not interested in commercial for me. And so I was like, but I came back with hundreds of tapes of these Hong Kong films. I don't know if you remember that period when Hong Kong was like big, these Chinese films, and Chinese ghost story and all these ghost story horror films, etc., and action, all these action films with Chow Yun-fat. I would find them, and luckily they were the same format in Hong Kong. And at the same time, they were subtitled, most of them, unless it was some crazy monster film. But it didn't matter because it was so crazy. It was entertaining. It didn't matter if it had subtitles or not. People would go for it, It's like, and so it was a huge success, I tell you. And then people suddenly started asking me, well, how about Bettie Page? And I was like, okay, I love Bettie Page, but there's no films. And then I met Paula Clone, and then she sold me the rights. And from there on, I released about 10 VHS, and then later on DVD, and recently on Blu-ray, I scanned the original Super 8 16 films of Bettie Page. And that was the first release in 91, through Cold Epic.
Interesting. Yeah. And so now your company is called Cult Epics, and you guys are still releasing films all the time, and also,
Yeah.
releasing the new book that we're talking about. And I think I love that whole origin story. And I think a lot of people don't know that about Tarantino, that like the beginning of Pulp Fiction, you know, John Travolta has just gotten back from Amsterdam because, yeah, in real life, Quentin Tarantino had written that script in Amsterdam. So while he was writing Pulp Fiction, he was going to your store to get John Woo films. Is that true?
Yeah, everything. If you look at all of his movies later on, you can see the origins. Obviously, he also worked in the video store, so he also knew a lot about films himself. But he was photographed in front of my store. It was in every press, every newspaper, television. Then Robert Rodriguez made El Mariachi. He came to my store. He picked his favorite 20 movies, and we all had them on VHS at the time. And he loved the store too, I remember. And we had celebrities, a rock musician. I remember the guys from Guar coming in, and Michael Jackson comes with his limousine and rents all the Hong Kong films, never returns them, and I had to send the record company a big bill to pay for that.
Yeah, like
for those
leave it to
tapes I found.
I was just gonna say, leave it to the guy that bought the entire Beatles catalog to not return his video rentals.
Exactly. And I won't tell you what other movies he rented, but only legal in Holland, I guess.
Oh, no.
Well, they were art house films shot in bathhouses in Turkey at the time. But I guess he saw something else in it.
Great. Now this episode's going to get subpoenaed at some point.
Right.
Well, I didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. Right. You guys didn't do anything, but I'm just telling you. I mean,
this is what happened.
I mean, it's on record. What happened? What do you mean?
Oh, no, I was saying you're just saying what happened. It is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, these films were, art house films released by Cinemine at the time, which is an art house label. But, they had nudity in it, and, it was a different time. But still, these films are regarded art house films and highly regarded, but he just saw something else in it.
Right. What about...
Sorry, Joe. I was just going to ask a question real quick.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and maybe this will derail you, Joe. This is the challenge of doing Skype things. But look at this. Joe just left. You can't see him, Nico. He just walked away.
He did?
Yeah, he just walked away.
Whatever.
Like, it's just
Why?
he just left. So no, but what I was gonna say is I remember when I went to a place called Scarecrow Video in Seattle for the first time in the 90s, and it was a sort of multi-level emporium of every kind of strange unknown film to me that I'd ever imagined existing.
Right.
And I think for a lot of people to sort of if you're trying to help someone understand that there's an entire sort of undercurrent of a completely different world of a lot of different films that are beyond what's on Netflix or whatever, right, to the most pedestrian sort of film watcher or viewer, what would you sort of say are like the points of entry that one must sort of take in? Is it, I mean, obviously you could say like any kind of Criterion Collection type of things or stuff like that, but even I'm talking about a little bit more independent, a little bit weirder, a little bit more out there, but like maybe some points of entry.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean exactly. You mean
it's kind of like
what Cult Epics releases, or
like if you're a person that's not really into underground film, but are interested in a lot of the things that are happening or have happened historically, it's kind of like if somebody's all of a sudden interested in rock and roll, you're probably going to say, well, there's this band called Led Zeppelin, you should check them out. Like what are the sort of the starter points, like that you might recommend to people to sort of be an entree into that world?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, I must say I don't really release underground films. I maybe make underground films, and I released a couple of underground films like Wonder Weirdo by Carl Anderson. But basically, I'm like into auteurs, like real filmmakers who are in their own world. You know what I'm saying? Like, one of my favorite films of the day was Giulio Questi's Dead Laden Egg. And, now they call it a giallo. It wasn't made as a giallo, but they cut it as a giallo because giallo was, giallo is now a term everybody knows kind of what's horror films. And of course, Dario Argento is more known ever now because of Suspiria. But before, he was also kind of underground, you know. And so people like that started, you know, that whole giallo scene, like because of with the Crystal Plummets, and producers see that they cut Dead Lady Neck as a giallo, and I'm actually very happy to announce today that I just signed a deal with Nucleus Films in the UK, who did new 2K transfers of the director's cut and the English and Italian language giallo cut. They did it a couple of years ago. They never wanted me to have the masters, but we signed a deal like a month ago, and I'm very happy to announce they're finally coming out in its full glory. I mean, the masters the producers gave me at the time were good for Blu-ray, but not good enough. They were standard definition. It does look better on Blu-ray than on DVD. But that's all I got, but now I got all this great new transfers, and I'm very excited. We had what's his name, Natalia Thompson, and from Mondo Digital, and Roy Howard, who writes all the giallo books in the U.S., do the audio commentaries.
Cool.
And with a whole bunch of new extras, have the short film with Julia Questi made later, and he was an auteur, and if you ever read the book on Cult Epics Releases, it's divided in chapters by directors. You know what I'm saying? Not by genre necessarily, a little bit, but so basically I've become friends with these directors like Fernando Arrabal. He was if you didn't hear about him before, then you probably never heard about him. But he was like the buddy of Alexander Jodorowsky, who everybody knows. And Alexander Jodorowsky made all this, this kind of psychedelic-looking but esoteric films in the 70s.
Sure.
And Arrabal was making these also, and they're surrealistic films. And Arrabal was also making these surrealistic films, were more like political, and very extreme, but kind of like more like Buñuel. And, once you see a film of him like Viva la Muerte or I Will Walk Like a Crazy Horse, you go like, whoa, where have I been? Why have I never seen this? And that's what I'm after. I'm trying to find these masterpieces of cinema, which nobody ever seen before. And, it takes forever to get the materials out of the vaults and get the transfers done. And, some films took me like 10 years, 15 years to get the rights. I mean, I just recently got Moonchild, which is the second film by Augusto Filarango. And Moonchild is the film he did with Lisa Gerrard of Dead Can Dance. Dead Can Dance just had a world tour announced in May.
Interesting.
And it was canceled. And they did also the score for the film. This film was never released on DVD or VHS, or VHS maybe, VHS I think, but not in the U.S. And he is the director of In the Glass Cage, which is still plays in art houses to this day, controversial film as well. And so that took me 15 years to find the right holder, because it switches all the time, and to find the materials at the same time to do a Blu-ray. And it was a big hit because people discovered the film. It's such a beautiful, gorgeous film. And also now again, his third film, 99.9, again, a premiere for you, which if there are fans watching or listening who like horror films, 99.9 is the film, his first real kind of mystery horror ghost story. It was the beginning of the Spanish horror films in the 80s. I mean, the Spanish horror cinema in the 60s and 70s was there, with all these Living Toms films and stuff. And then Toms of the Living Dead and stuff like that. But in the 90s, he was the first one in the realm of people like later on, obviously, was the director of all the big Spanish films, Guillermo del Toro. So Guillermo del Toro, he started that whole thing with some other filmmakers, including Guillermo del Toro, and they worked with the same people. The guy who did the score for 99.9 also won an Oscar for Pan's Labyrinth during this film.
Oh, wow.
And the cinematographer is the same cinematographer Guillermo del Toro uses a couple of years later. But this guy, was in Spain and set up this whole trend of art house horror films, kind of. I don't know if you've ever seen his films, but they're fascinating. So I work with directors kind of on the long run, and then slowly start releasing their oeuvre in time, and that can take time.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so it's not so much like you said, the distinction between underground filmmakers who are making like low budget movies, on the run kind of thing, that maybe don't ever get theatrically distributed, but like what you're actually putting out are well known directors who are making movies that may not have been seen or may not have been heard of by the vast mainstream audience, but they're movies that, for instance, the Moonchild movie you were just talking about actually showed at Cannes and is obviously like a high production value art film.
Exactly. Yeah, all the films are pretty big films. I'm now working with the agent of Just Jakin. And Just Jakin, he was a known director. I mean, he did Emmanuel and Histoire de O and Gwendolyn.
Oh, sure.
And he made 2 other films. I'm actually finalizing the contract right now, actually, as we speak. And we did the transfer of Madame Clouds, which was released in the U.S. as The French Woman. And this film, they did a new transfer in 4K with a cinematographer who was pretty well known. I mean, he shot Ronin with Rob De Niro, beautiful film. The Lover, the beautiful film too. And he shot this film, Madame Cloud, The French Woman. And French Woman was released in the 70s and gained $9 million in the box office. The thing is, the younger people do not know about these films unless you promote it one way or the other, and the older people will find it, but they're not necessarily Blu-ray fanatics, collectors.
Right.
They're too old. They probably just want the DVD. They may not even have a Blu-ray player. I'm not sure.
Right.
But these are very important films, and I'm trying to bring these films back, which are kind of forgotten and lost. And that's another one. And we're actually going to interview Just Jakin next month in France. I don't know how I did that, but I don't have to go there, but we're doing it. And at the same time, working on a book on Sylvie Kristal's lost films, the films she did in the 70s beside Emmanuel in Europe with people like Borowczyk and Alain Robbe-Gouillet and Claude Chabrol. And people didn't even know she did all these films, because they're not available. They're not released. And but soon it will change. And I'm very happy to be part of that.
That's going to be another book project that you're going to do with her?
Yeah, we're doing another book. The next book is actually Christian Dad, early photography by Edward Culver on Only Fear of Pain period, 1981-82. Mm-hmm. That's a coffee table photography book with the original albums reissued for the 40th anniversary. And then working now with a writer called Jeremy Ritchie on a book, and it's written. It's like a story about each chapter is on these films, and it's a fantastic writer. I always loved his articles in Moon in the Gutter, and he is writing it, and it's going to be a coffee table book, fully illustrated on the films, for next year.
Yeah, that sounds really good. How do you decide, again, I mean, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, when you're like, coming across a certain subject that you want to explore, and then you've got to decide like how exactly to do that. What makes you, decide that, the Sylvie Kristal project is a good idea for a book versus a good idea for a documentary about her career that nobody remembers or something like that? Like, how do you decide what makes a good book project? That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Okay. Well, I don't decide it. It's decided by others. And something happens, and then I say yes or no. But no, basically, this guy was telling me about that he was writing it. He's been writing for 8 years. And I said, thumbs up. And I said, I want to release some films of Sylvie Kristal nobody ever seen before. Oh. And anyway, then this year he contacted me again. He said, are you interested in releasing it? Because I love the way your books look and design, and he loves it. And I was like, okay, well, give me a content and give me one chapter. I have a look, and I look at it, and I'm fascinated by his writing, and the whole idea is good. And then I figured, okay, well, I was already going to do some French films, so we can all do it all at once.
Oh, right on. So it just sort of fit well together.
It just happened on the right moment, and we just try to figure out when to release it exactly. But it's in the works. I'm working on it every day. So.
It seems like, I mean, we've been talking to you for about an hour now, and we don't want to keep you a whole lot longer.
Oh,
but
okay.
I think one of the I know it doesn't even feel like it, right? That's how time flies when you're having fun. but I feel like one of the themes that keeps coming up is that these different projects you do and these different people you meet, it just seems like there's this sort of like good luck in a lot of the things that you do. Do you feel that way? Do you feel that you sort of just find your way to the people and the opportunities that are best for you?
Yeah. Well, actually, I never know what it means when people say to you, good luck. That means either they're sarcastic or they mean it. I'm not sure. But to me, it's not luck. To me, it's not luck. It's just meant to be. I'm just that one of these people who just is meant to do certain things. And I just follow it. I get rewarded by it, meaning that I can, have a living from it. But I just do what my instinct says. And that's about it. And I never really released. I mean, I got movies offered, and I could have said yes, but I was like, nah, it doesn't really go with me. The film has to be artistic, otherwise I feel sorry later. I mean, I got movies offered like, Men Behind the Sun. Although I must say it's a very well-made film. Or like what's the other movie called? The Serbian film. Serbian movie, what's it called? The Serbian movie, you know about this movie?
I don't know.
Okay, well, that's one of these are some of the most extreme films ever. Where the director sent the film to me from Serbia, and it's not real, but it's very extreme. And some other company released it. They actually had to release it cut first because they were afraid to release it. But the film didn't even come in the country the first time. It didn't arrive. Second time he sent it on a different cover. I watched it, but my girlfriend at the time said, "Well, Nico, you're not going to release this, please." And I said, "Yeah, you may be right. There's nothing artistic about it one way or the other."
Right.
And that's me. I mean, I'm an artist, and I'm into artistic films. And even if they, are in the horror or erotic genre, I would call it. I don't release exploitation films like Severin or different companies do, because then it doesn't really go with me, who I am and what I do, and I hope people appreciate that. But, you will always be entertained if you watch a cult epics film, I must say. I hear that many times that people go like, "Whoa, I've never seen it. What the hell happened?" I'm so glad I saw this. And, and I'm like, okay, well, thank you.
Well, I think all the movies that I've seen that you've released, the ones I've seen I love, and the ones I haven't seen look like the movies I would want to see. I think that your new book is something that I hope people want to check out. It really is a beautiful, like I said, it's kind of like a psychedelic masterpiece in a way. Just this otherworldly setting of Mexico is beautiful. Women of the Sun, Bunny Yeager in Mexico, and then also the new Blu-ray is called The Claire Sinclair Show. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's Bunny's last shoot. Is one of the episodes.
And we'll have all of the links, to your website. And I actually sent Brian, while we were talking, I found a link to the gallery that has the Bunny Yeager show up right now in Los Angeles, the La Luz de Jesus Gallery, the Light of Jesus Gallery in Los Angeles. So I sent Brian a link for that video, so people will be able to click that link and look on YouTube and sort of tour the exhibition at a distance if they can't get to Los Angeles and make an appointment. But we really appreciate you being with us, Nico. You and I have been emailing each other for about a month now since I got that release about your book, and I'm very, very happy that we actually had a chance to sort of talk and get to know you a bit more. And as you come out with your next project or something, we'd love to have you back on.
All right, I love it. Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nico. It's super exciting to get so much insight and to be. I think that people should see all of your involvements and projects and creative work as doorways to worlds that they may need to just open. So if you're uninitiated, and this book, the digital version that I've seen, it makes me really want to make sure that I have something in hand because it's beautiful. So congratulations on all the great work, and it's been awesome to meet and talk to you.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for having me come on.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to say goodbye to our audience real quick and get off this live cast, and then we'll do a little green room hang after. How about that? We'll say our goodbyes then. So hang on 1 second here. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate it. If you're listening on Anchor or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify, and also if you're watching live, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and you can always find us at artfightpodcast.com. And we appreciate everybody's support and interest and making it all possible. So we're going to be out. Joe, do you have anything you want to quickly announce for yourself, or anything you want to plug?
I don't think this week there's anything I want to say. Right. So I think we're good.
All right. All right. Well, so again, thanks everybody. I think we're good. We are out, and you guys hang on 1 minute. I'll be right back with you. But for the rest of you, we're out.
Good for it.